Hello, I'm Rick Hertless, founder of His Gospel Power. Thank you for joining with our program. Please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button. And thank you so much to all of those who do support our program through your financial support and through your prayer support. It means the world to us to know that you are out there helping us to bring this ministry around the world as we do these studies of the last days. We're in the book of Daniel chapter 5. And of course, we are looking at it from a last days standpoint, but also, especially this first part of Daniel, as the character of God and the faithfulness of God. And so that's what this is really showing more than anything. Is this first part of the book of Daniel is showing that. So now we're looking at Daniel 5:17, and of course we already know that there's been the writing on the wall. The king has called Daniel in and asked him to interpret the writing on the wall. So verse 17 says, Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another, yet I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. Well, I'm going to stop right there for just a minute, because to me, that seems to be such a contrast of today's ministers. Because what happened is, the verse before that, the king said, Now if you can read the writing, make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. And of course, and Daniel turns it down. Now, the king's going to still stand by his word ultimately, and he's going to do it anyway, but that's not the point. Daniel turned it down. He said, Look, I don't need all that junk. You can keep all that stuff yourself. I'm going to minister to you and tell you what God's told me to tell you anyway. The contrast of that to me, of seeing some of these that are putting themselves around Trump. Now, I was listening to a pastor a couple of days ago who had gone to one of these meetings with Trump and several other pastors, and he said he was actually embarrassed to be there. He said some of these big-time preachers were pushing old women out of the way to make sure they got to the front seat so they could be next to the president. And then, of course, I'm sure if he offered him any, which, of course, just naturally, it probably came some kind of financial blessing with it, just because they were with the president, whether he actually just said, I'm going to pay you or whatever. Somehow they received some sort of compensation for that, if just the prestige of being able to be around the president. I'm sure they had something that went with that. I think the contrast is very sad, actually, of what I'm seeing with this first verse, but it shows the degradation of even the ministry. Now, I believe this year, and I've been listening to many of the prophets that are even saying this year, many of these pastors are going to be called on the carpet for this. It sounds to me like many of them will die this year because, and we will see, but I was listening to one prophet that said that these men, these pastors, these preachers, high position preachers will be dying in threes. And so not just one here and one there, but dying in threes. It will be very recognizable. God, and now it is, what he said is, God has said that he must take them out so that he can still give them the reward for the faithfulness that they've done in the past. But they've strayed. They're gone. They're all about their power and their money. And we see that. And it is a black eye, worse than that, but it's a black eye. That's the best I can think of on the Word of God. It's a black eye on Jesus, on Christianity, you name it. And so it should be interesting. It should be interesting to see what happens this year, Brother Ron.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was just listening to an independent journalist that does his own research, and he was basically doing the research on basically voting fraud and how Israeli intelligence is promising to secure our next election, which to me was interesting because what's the number one country in the world that wants to ensure that Trump gets reelected? So Israel and, their corporations over there that handle voter fraud are willing to handle our voter fraud prevention here in America for Trump's reelection. I thought that was kind of it. I mean, it was one of those you listen to it and you go, now who's rigging the election? Basically, Israel says, we're going to guard your election to make sure that there's no voter fraud and basically to ensure that Trump gets reelected. So, I mean, there's just, it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. But
well, you know what? I'm not one who cares one way or the other because, number one, strangely enough, in which if you studied politics at all, and I have a little bit, but I don't have a master's degree in it or anything, but I've studied politics and I've studied our processes. And our processes in America for president, specifically for president. Now, on the local level for, let's say Nancy Pelosi, those elections can be rigged fairly easily. There's not many districts that have to be bought. It can be rigged. But the presidential election, on the other hand, with the lack of networking, with the lack of all of those things, Barack Obama, before Trump was elected, he said it's impossible to rig our elections. Now, of course, after Trump won, he said, "Oh, Trump rigged the election." So you guys take that one in the way you want to. But so what I'm saying is, it's all smoke and mirrors. That anyone would say they can either rig the election or they're going to protect against rigging the election because of the way that our elections for president in the United States are set up. It is practically impossible to rig it. Now, personally, my feeling about Hillary Clinton is they did everything they could to rig the election and it still failed. And I think that is the biggest reason that she was so upset. Because if there was any rigging going on, I believe it was in that camp. But, however, to me that was also proof positive that at this point in the game, now what they want to do, unfortunately, is they want to, under Homeland Security, they wanted to centralize our elections. Once that happens, if our elections ever get centralized under whether Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, whoever, at that point, they will absolutely be able to be rigged, and our democracy will be over.
Well, right, and on that point, the fewer software programs that control the counting method, the easier it is to rig it because it's the fewer software programs you have to manipulate. So if it is centralized under one accounting system, you just have to have the person in charge of writing the software.
Absolutely.
And
you just got to be able to pay him enough money, pay his price, whatever it is, figure it out. And everybody pretty much has a price, I think.
Well, and to another point, I found this out personally. Everybody that claims that the 20 million illegal votes that Hillary Clinton got, that was impossible. How would she get 20 million illegal votes? I personally found out how easy it was. I lived in a different county a year ago, and I moved to a new county. Well, here in Texas, all you have to do is go online to change your driver's license. And all you have to do is put in your new address. You don't have to prove anything. So when I got my new driver's license in the mail, they sent me a new voter registration. I was sitting at home literally with 2 valid driver's licenses and 2 voting cards. And I'm sitting there looking at it and going, I did this all online. I could literally...
You could have voted twice.
Well, I was thinking even more devious than that. I could literally be a resident and a voting member in every county in Texas if every month I just changed my address.
And that's a good point. You could do that.
So for someone, and then every...
Of course, in Texas, those of you who are listening around the world don't realize how big Texas is. That would be a lot of running, but still.
Well, imagine me. I don't know how many counties are in Texas. Say there's, I don't know.
Oh, there's a bunch. I don't remember either.
Yeah,
but it's in the hundreds.
Let's just say 100 just to be safe. I could vote 100 times on Election Day. Imagine if 10,000 people did that exact same thing in one state. I mean, so that, yes, it is that easy to manipulate the election from the voter side. But yeah, like we were saying, from the
254 counties.
There you go.
But now, I mean,
Could I get it all done in one day?
No,
Probably.
you could not.
Right.
Absolutely no. And so that would not be a viable way. But if you could get thousands to go to 3 different counties, so you're really skewing, the vote. Well, but that was not so much the point, I guess. We kind of got off on a deal there, which is, I think it's still important. However, my point is the integrity of Daniel. That, like I said, when we started this book, that this was showing the integrity of Daniel. So when you see the prophecies of Daniel, you realize his integrity. And it shows the character and integrity of God and the faithfulness of God. So when we start seeing the prophecies in the last part of the book of Daniel, you can say, okay, you can bank on those. And of course, that's the entire Word of God. That's the reason that you want to look at these things, to be able to understand, look, this is why this is telling this, so we'll understand the integrity of God, of Daniel, and the faithfulness of God. And of course, the integrity of Daniel is, look, I'm going to tell you what this says because I'm God's man. You can keep all your stuff. Okay? Now we get into the next verse. He says, O King, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom and majesty, glory, and honor. He's making sure that Belshazzar knows where the kingdom came from. It was set up by God, given to him by God, and that's the only reason that he had a kingdom. So he's making sure that Belshazzar understands that. Then he says, and because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. And whomever he wished, he put down. Now, I'm going to pull that over into America, because I believe that is the story. And really, and it's not only America. You could say the same thing about Britain when it was the world. It was, at one point, it was the world kingdom, if you will. You had, it escaped me. But anyway, any huge kingdom, well, the Greeks, the Romans, any kingdom that has been set up, it's been set up by God. And the same goes for America, that we have been set up by God. And we hold it in our hands. Somebody said yesterday, and it really kind of warmed my heart, because I've said this many times, the reason that God judges America as a people, and of course Ron and I talked about this as far as Houston goes, but it goes in the same with America. Someone said one time, why would God judge, I'm going to use Houston because that's who we were talking about. Why would God judge Houston when you have only one evil man, the mayor, at that point? Why wouldn't he just judge the mayor? See, we bear the responsibility because we are voters. This is a democratic society. We put that man into office. The citizens of Houston put the mayor into office. The citizens of America put Barack Obama into office. The citizens of America put Trump into office. So whichever one is going to follow the most godly principles. I'm not saying the most godly man, okay? Because it's still up for grabs. Is Trump the most godly man? Well, maybe not. I mean, he has some character flaws, but guess what? I'm betting a very good bet that you do too. You would not want your life placed under a microscope like every president or every politician has. Now, the fact that they have not been able to find, even with, now, has Trump had some character flaws? Absolutely. But he's had no character flaws that were illegal. And that's the problem that they're having right now. They can't find anything to be able to tear him down. He's had the kind of character flaws that everybody has. He's had maybe illicit affairs, or he's gotten drunk some night, or whatever. The same kind of thing that chances are you, the listener, have had. But you haven't killed anybody, you haven't raped anybody, you haven't stolen anything, you haven't done any of that kind of thing. So nothing illegal that would get you into that kind of trouble. The same with Trump. And that's the problem. And many of our other politicians, however, have actually done illegal things that were overlooked. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and without getting into a lot of detail, Barack Obama committed high treason, and so did Hillary Clinton, but they were never held accountable for it. If they would have been taken to court, they would be in prison, but they were never taken to court. Well, Trump, they're taking him to court. Problem is, they can't find anything to put him in jail over, and they're chomping at the bit because of that. So all of those things lead to God putting all of these countries, these kingdoms into place, exactly like Daniel is saying about Nebuchadnezzar. We have just a few minutes left. Brother Ron, you have some closing comments.
Yeah, I was just going to make a point that I've never heard anybody go through, say, just the history of the Bible and look at all the good and the bad powerful kingdoms and what the spiritual result of each one was. Because like you just said, God raises up the good and the bad empires for a purpose. I've never heard anyone go back through and, whether they're perfectly accurate or not, determine what the purpose of that evil or good power was. And I think we'd see a real interesting correlation of the good ones and then the bad ones and the good that came out of the bad ones. And like we've been saying about President Trump, yeah, he may not be a godly man or a righteous man, but look at the opportunities that Christians have as a result under Trump that we wouldn't have had under Hillary. So God could have put any decent human being up there that had no sign of Christianity but was a decent person, and we would still have the same opportunity as compared to a self-proclaimed witch that probably would have had us in war by now, and who knows how many millions of Americans dead. So we have to look at not what he is, but the opportunities that we have under the fact of how he's leading. And I think that's really what too many people overlook. They look at him more than they look at what we have as an opportunity with him being in there.
Yeah, and I really believe it's actually pretty easy to tell which each one of those kingdoms that were put into place, what they were for. It's very simple. They were to make sure Israel succeeded. There was that promise, the Davidic promise that there would be a king on the throne forever. And of course that was Jesus. In order to make all of that happen, God had to make sure that that Israel survived. And in fact, Paul said in the book of Romans that, should we discount? Remember when we talked about this last week, that he cut off the branches because they were disobedient. And he said, well, so does that mean that the Jews were worth nothing? He said, no, God forbid. They were the givers of the words of God. And so they had a lot of purpose. Well, that's the same thing those kingdoms did, which was to make sure that that kingdom happened so that we would be able to continue and have Jesus the Messiah come in, fulfilling all the prophecies that God had said they would have. Well, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for joining with our program as we look into the book of Daniel and in the last days. Thank you for joining with. Please go to hisgospelpower.org and click on the donate button or the contact us button. And to all of those who are our listeners, we appreciate your support. Until next time, I pray you receive his gospel power today.
He died for you. He died for me. From our sin, he set us free. He loved us so, his life he gave. So if we ask, we can be saved. He's calling you, he's calling you. Jesus make you whole. Come near with me, and we will pray that all your sin be washed away.